Right, so one of the things I'm frequently asked is what are the most common mistakes that business owners make when they're recruiting? And so to talk about that a little bit today, the first thing that I see as a common mistake is that people focus on skills rather than values alignment. Second thing is they often ask the wrong type of questions in interviews. And the third thing would be that they neglect to put some kind of competency test into the interview. So let me elaborate on some of those things. So let's talk first of all about focusing on skills rather than values alignment. What do I mean by that? It's a thing a bit like getting married, if you like. So imagine you go out on a first date with someone and you sit across the table from them and this lovely lady is looking at you saying, yes, I love keeping house and I'm a really good cook. And, I enjoy knitting or I look after the garden, and you think, wow, this is the person for me. Would you like to marry me? Because let's face it, we spend nearly as much time at work with someone as we do in a marriage. But of course, we wouldn't marry that person after one date. But that's what we sort of do when we interview people. We get them in for one shot, ask them some questions, and at the end of that, we make an arrangement with them to come in for 8 hours a day, for 5 days a week, for the rest of our lives kind of thing. So getting clear on what kind of values you want people to have is really important to start with, so that you can then look for the attributes and traits that might go along with that. Now, I'm not saying that skills are not important. I'm simply saying that we start off with values and then of course we test for skills, which you'll see when we come to point 3 in a moment. So my second point was, talking about asking the wrong kind of questions. And this comes across mostly because small business owners in general, don't have a lot of experience when it comes to interviewing skills or recruiting people. Where did you go to school to learn how to interview someone? So we have a propensity to ask closed questions, and closed questions don't really get us a lot of information. They tend to be staccato, and some people will feel like they're a bit under the Spanish Inquisition if they're getting asked a lot of closed questions. What I like to suggest people do instead is ask situational or behavioural questions. Not your standard thing like, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, because people are always prepared for that and they'll come up with whatever they think you want to hear. What we know about behavioural stuff is that past behaviour is the best indicator of future behaviour. So in an interview situation, we want to be able to ask questions that point to those kind of behaviours. An example might be something like, so tell me about a time when you were faced with an ethical dilemma. What did you do? What was the dilemma for you? Why did you find it an ethical dilemma? And so we actually sort of flesh that out in the interview so that we can find out how they handled that in the past, because that's a great indicator of how they're likely to handle something like this in the future. And you can see that we're getting right into their values rather than just what their skills are. So my final point is that people forget or they fail to create some kind of competency test when they're interviewing people. Now, you don't normally do this in the interview situation. You might bring someone in, you've read their resume, and you've asked them a series of behavioural or situational questions to start with. But you then want to make sure, if you've got a good feel for this person, that they've got the skills that you actually need. And the test that you set them needs to be relevant to whatever job it is that they're going to be doing. So ask yourself, what skills are critical for this type of job? Some of you might have seen an interview I did recently with Shane Spears where I talked about a guy who has a tree felling business, and he put someone on the Friday, fired him on the Friday as well, because when this man, the new employee, started up a chainsaw, he nearly took my client's leg off. Now, fortunately, my client was a little smarter than that and he wasn't standing too close. But imagine if it hadn't been him and he hadn't had that kind of experience, the kind of mess that the business owner could have found themselves in. So really, had he set a test right at the outset, stand over there 30 metres away from me, start that chainsaw for me so that I can watch, he wouldn't have employed the guy in the first place. So I want you to think about what kind of questions you're going to ask people, what kind of test you're going to give them, and finally being really clear for yourself on what values are important to you for the people that you'd have to be spending 8 hours a day with. I'm Dawn Russell, this is Dawn's Diagnosis, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.